Well, we continue our series on spiritual warfare, and this is actually the second last Sunday in our series. And today we're looking at strongholds, and actually next week we'll look at strongholds again too. But this morning, specifically for strongholds, we're looking at high places and the strongman. And so that's the title up here too: strongholds, high places, and the strongman. It's one of those topics sometimes that people are a little confused by. What was this whole thing of high places and the strongman? What is this, and what does this all mean? Is it something that we should be afraid of, or how are we supposed to handle this? Well, to begin with, it's not something for us to be afraid of, because we know who the higher power is. God is a higher power, more power than any demon out there. In fact, if you were to put all of the demonic forces, all the angelical forces, and all of humanity and all of creation together, none of that is powerful enough to overtake God. God is all-powerful, and all other beings and things have limited power. So because God is the ultimate authority and ultimate power in all things, we don't need to fear this. But it's something in our communities. Sometimes there's strongholds in our communities, spiritual strongholds, that need to be torn down in order for us to be effective in doing the work God has called us to do. That's why it's always important for us to ask Lord to go ahead of us. Because if God doesn't go ahead of us in the work, our work for Him isn't though. So we must examine who we worship then. In our passage this morning, the religious leaders accused Jesus of something. He accuses Jesus of casting out the demons by the power in the name of Beelzebub. Well, Beelzebub was one of the names that was used for Satan. So, in essence, they were blaspheming Jesus' name. They were wrongly placing where Jesus' authority and power was coming from. What's interesting to understand, though, too, that another name for Beelzebub is Chemosh. And Chemosh was a god that was worshipped by the Moabites. Pretty scary worship demon that they worshipped. And actually, Chemosh was exactly that, was a demon. And what the Moabites believed about Chemosh is that they wanted sacrifices, including sacrificing children. Now, we know that for the Jewish people, what we understand from the Old Testament, the sacrifices that happened was the sacrifice of a lamb or a ram for sins. But in the practice for Chemosh, they sacrificed people, children. Sounds pretty awful, doesn't it? Because it is. God tells us to respect human life, doesn't He? That we're not to murder people. So the Moabites were worshiping a demon. Just like all other religions. All other religions were worshiping another god, or actually worshiping either just an idea or a material thing or a demon. And sometimes those material things or the ideas were behind a demon. Or, a demon behind those things. God tells us in His Word that if we're to worship any other god other than Him, it was an abomination to Him. Because they're all false. What is it that we desire to have or to do? That's why we need to check where we're at. Or is there something else that we place in more priority than God? God must be the center of our lives in order to, in all things. If we were to look at the Ten Commandments, we would actually see that the first few commandments have to do with worshiping the one true God. Verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. And the next commandment that follows in verse 4, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath what he was. But basically accusing him of a certain crime. The officer said, okay, hold on, we need to investigate. Found out that actually even the accusation from this boss was true. And so they arrested this other man instead, who got decked. Well, sacrifice is a highly spiritual thing. Even if other religions recognize that and practice sacrifice of some kind. For us as Christians, it's no different. So we don't need to do sacrifices of animals for us anymore. But we must sacrifice ourselves to the Lord. That means surrendering ourselves to him. Of contact to the spiritual realm. 1 Corinthians 10 verse 18 to 22 says, consider the people of Israel participants in the altar. What do I imply then? That food offered to idols is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, I imply that what pagans sacrifice they offer to demons and not to God. I do not want you to be participants with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. What the Apostle Paul is saying here to the church in Corinth is that what we sacrifice to opens up the spiritual world. Because it's matters of who is behind the altar that we worship. So an altar can be a holy altar. For while you are gathered up, that's the wrong chapter, that's chapter 13. Chapter 12, rather. Verse 29. Or how can anyone carry off his property unless he first binds the strong man, and then he will plunder his house? Here Jesus is talking about the strong man needing to be bound. It's an illustration of if someone were to break into a home and to steal stuff, and the person is home, that's kind of a dumb way to steal, isn't it? To break in someone's home when they're home, right? Most times, the people aren't home, or good chance they're not home. But if they were to break in, they'd have to try to subdue the owner or the people living in the home before they could steal, wouldn't they? And that's the point that Jesus is making. In order to deal with the strong man in the home, they have to be bound first. Now, in the case of anything other than God, the demonic, wherever the altar is behind, the strong man has to be bound first. Some believe that this does not refer to spiritual warfare, this verse. But it does. Because of the context that is dealing with the demonic. Jesus says these words after he casts out the demon. And the religious leaders say that Jesus was casting out demons by the name of Beelzebub. So the context is dealing with spiritual warfare. In the parallel passage to this, chapter 11, verse 14 through 28, we see that at the end of this section, Jesus talks about having a demon expelled from a person and how that demon wanders around and then returns and finds that the house has been swept clean and is clean, but is empty, and then goes and finds 7 more demons, more evil than itself, and re-enters the person. This speaks of both the strong man and is about spiritual warfare. So what is the strong man? The strong man, the Greek word here is iskouros, which means strong or mighty, of a living being, particularly of one who has strength of soul to sustain the attacks of Satan. It's to bolster demonic attacks. Upon looking at this definition, we can see that the strong man is a demon who sustains the attacks of Satan upon a person. What gives the demon legal rights to occupy the stronghold is sin. If we continue in sin, the demon has a right to continue to oppress and attack us. Again, the demon has no control of you, though. The demon has no control of you, but he does have claim to torment you and to tempt you. This is why so many Christians live in bondage throughout their life. They continue in their sin and feel like they can't have victory because they don't understand or deal with the strong man. Often this is the case with addictions. And I'm not saying that there isn't counseling that can happen to help deal with addictions. We know that there's physical things that happen in the brain too that need to be healed in order for someone to overcome addictions. But we cannot forget the spiritual part that plays in this. So then, how do we bind the strong man? Let's be clear here in a moment too. If the person behind the altar is God, God then is the strong man, and he does not need to be bound or cast out. We want God to be in our lives. But in the case of the 14, it says this: after Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you are well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." It's the story of when Jesus had healed a man and told him, "Don't sin anymore now then, so nothing worse will happen to you." Because sometimes physical ailments come about because of sin in our lives. It's a way that sometimes God gets our attention. But hear me clearly on this. Not all ailments have to do with sin. It all has to do with our relationship with God, and God wants to use this to draw us closer to him. But some physical ailments are because of sin. Again, not all, but some are. That's why Jesus says to him, "Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." Sin no more, so that way Satan does not have a right to become a strong man in your life. As we stop sinning, we also need to be filled with the things of God, though. Because if we are not filled with the things of God, the stronghold can be rebuilt. I mentioned this passage already, Luke 11, verse 24 through 26. And it's the passage again of when demons cast out. They leave and then they come back to find the house goes, finds 7 more demons more evil than himself, and they enter. And the person is worse than before. I remember I was counseling one person who was dealing with a habitual sin in their life. And I was counseling this person, I said to this person, what you need to do then now the strong man other than God can be bound so that we can erect a godly altar, him being strong man in our life. I came across this quote. I don't know who said this, but I think it illustrates this well. Bad habits, easy to get into, but hard to get out of. You ever slept in have you ever gone to go and shop for a new mattress? Because yours is maybe lumpy and rolly or has valleys in it. I remember some time ago, Cher and I were looking for a new mattress, and ours was bad. I think the reason why we were close in bed all the time is because it was dipped in the middle, so we were always rolling into the middle. And I remember one bed we tried. It's actually the mattress we have now. Tried it briefly, quickly, and it was nice. And the first sleep on it was nice. So bad habits are like comfortable beds. Easy to get into, hard to get out of. So we must examine our altars. Are they a godly one or a demonic one? Tear down the ungodly ones and build up a godly one. And also examine who is behind the altar. Is it God? Then continue to sacrifice yourself upon the altar before God. And if it is not God, tear it down. I want to encourage us to 3 points of action. The first is this. Again, examine to whom you are sacrificing, and with what are you sacrificing. Are you going to sacrifice your desires? Or are you fulfilling your own desires that are not godly desires? Examine those. B, examine what is giving demons legal access to behind the altar. That's often why it's important for us to examine ourselves frequently. Lord, where have I sinned? That's why we do that before communion each Sunday. And C, obey God. Submit and surrender to Him. This keeps the door shut from the devil entering, denying him legal access. Do you want to be free of any spiritual strongholds and strongmen? Then surrender to Jesus.